third webinar, and we're recording in progress. That's good to know. It's actually the third of a series of webinars, and this particular topic, working with traditional owners, has been identified as one of the real hot topics for the councils that we're working with, and they're all very keen to dig much deeper into how to do this most effectively. To open up, it's my pleasure to hand over to Councillor Amanda Stone. Amanda's actually a councillor from the city of Yarra here in Melbourne. She's the chair of the ICLEI Regional Executive Committee, but Amanda is also a special advisor to the ICLEI Global Executive Committee on Nature, so a very passionate champion of nature in cities. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you, Steve, and good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our third webinar on cities with nature. Can I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, and I'm on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung land, and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and including those who are with us today. You know, we've entered this year the UN decade of ecosystem restoration, with its aim of preventing, halting and reversing the degradation of ecosystems worldwide. It's a daunting task. We've got a lot of knowledge already, but despite that, we have been causing enormous damage to our planet and using more resources than we can sustain. And we've been dismissing nature, especially in our cities and our regional centres. And we know that if we're going to have a future, we're going to have to bring nature back into the heart of what we do, of everything and how we live. We're going to need to learn in very practical ways how to live in harmony with nature and to stop fighting it. Here, we are really lucky to live in a land with thousands of years of transmitted knowledge through traditional owners about how to live in harmony with nature, how to respect and care for the land so it can look after us. Learning from traditional owners wherever we are is a gift, but it's also a door to a future of a more respectful relationship with nature and with this ancient land. So I hope you find today's session valuable as part of that journey. And on behalf of ICLEI Oceania, I'd really like to thank those representatives from our 3 councils across Australia who've joined us today to share their own knowledge and experience and to help us all on that journey to living in harmony with nature so that we all have a future. Thanks, Steve. And you're on mute.
I knew that. Thanks, Amanda. Amanda's a great champion for us, great supporter, and brings the very important voice of elected councillors to it. So today we're going to listen to 3 stories, the first being from Cairns, the second from Adelaide, and the third from Outer Melbourne and the Yarra Ranges. And where each of them is telling their own story about how they're engaging with their traditional owners. As Jess said, please use the chat function. If we can answer some questions on the way through, we'd like to do it that way. So when Sophie has finished speaking, if there's 1 or 2 questions and we've got some time, we'll address them straight away and try to run this as a bit of a conversation. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Sophie Barrett from Cairns Regional Council. Sophie's advisor strategy and sustainability at the council, but I think is also a university lecturer in this field. And she's going to take us through how Cairns is engaging with their traditional custodians on climate change and also on coastal hazards, coastal management, their First Peoples Advisory Committee and Reconciliation Action Plan, and looking at co-design approach for the future. So, Sophie, it's all yours.
Thanks for the introduction, Steve, and thank you, Amanda. I'll just share my screen now.
You should be able to share now, Sophie.
Great. Thank you.
I think it's fine for the other speakers to switch your cameras off if you want to do that while we're listening.
All right, so I'm talking today about the work we've been doing engaging with traditional custodians on climate change and coastal hazards in the Cairns region. So I'd also like to start by acknowledging traditional owners of where everyone is coming from today, but also our own traditional owners in our area, which include about 8 different groups. I won't name them all, but the main ones on the land where I am today are Gimoy, Wallabarri, Yidinji and Yurakanji. So they've all been very engaged with a lot of our projects going forward. So a bit of an overview. In terms of our council, we do have a reconciliation action plan, which covers a number of key different areas, including cultural awareness within the organisation, how we consult, our policy position on that, as well as our involvement in cultural events, procurement, and also protocols about things like our welcomes to country and namings of parks and other areas as well. We're currently updating that at the moment, so we're working on a new version. We have also a First Peoples Advisory Committee. So this committee is there for council to talk to about and have input into council's decision-making process, and has 10 representatives from different groups around Cairns and also up into the Cape and Torres Strait as well. So they do provide advice and recommendation on some of council's activities and have input that way. And we've been progressing a number of things, including making sure we have flags, and we're doing a big renovation of our meeting rooms at the moment and putting in some of the cultural shields and things like that to make sure that we reflect that strong connection. So a bit about some of our connections. So you can see that little map in the middle is Cairns, but also Cairns is quite a gateway into the Cape area. So being one of the major sort of capital of the far north, I guess, linking into some of those Indigenous communities. A lot of the supply chains for the Cape come through Cairns. So a lot of the food and so forth, and the services for those communities are based in Cairns. So we have quite a high Indigenous population, about 9% of our population. So there is a strong connection with the Indigenous populations and the Torres Strait Islanders as well. So we've started a Rivers to Reef Climate Alliance with a number of surrounding councils, which includes Yarrabah Council, which is a council just off Cairns. So it's one of the largest Indigenous councils in Australia. And through the FNQ ROC as well, which is our regional group of councils. So that also then allows us to share those learnings and information on progressing collaborative climate action between councils with some of those other councils in the ROC region as well. And that's focusing on mitigation and adaptation activities, but also on how we can transition to a green economy and activate that whole region with the Cairns kind of as the capital of that region. And that's based around the rivers. So that's a picture of the Barron River in the background there. So one of the projects that I've been working on is the Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy. So that's been going for about 3 years now, and it's a Coastal Hazard Adaptation Strategy for Cairns. And this is funded through the Department of Environment and Science in Queensland and the Q Coast program, which comes through the Local Government Association of Queensland. So there's 31 coastal councils at the moment undertaking this work. And it is a plan on how we address sea level rise, storm tide inundation and erosion from now until 2100. So quite a long-term plan. At all stages through this project over the last 3 years, we've been engaging with 8 traditional owner groups in terms of things like values and their cultural expertise. And you can see the values map with some of those cultural areas identified in that. So as well as identifying those values and there's a lot of sensitivity around identifying some of those key cultural assets, and we made sure that that information was kept confidential and had agreements with each of the groups that that information would only be used for the purpose of those particular strategic planning projects. They were very keen also, a lot of the groups, to share their traditional knowledge. So you can see sort of some pictures of how they've adapted over time. So Fitzroy Island, which is off Cairns, actually used to be able to walk across there, and they have stories of that sea level rise coming up over time, sort of hundreds of years ago, and they remember those stories, and then over time they still use that island and adapted that by using canoes to get across to those areas. They did have a lot of significant sites in the Cairns region, in all of the areas, over those 8 groups, but also were quite keen to share their tribal science. So they had stories of throwing rocks in the ocean to strengthen coastlines and and some of the fish traps and how they worked in terms of the coastal management as well. So they're quite keen to use that tribal science going forward in terms of sharing that expertise, and it's particularly the knowledge of the natural habitat and the ecosystem services. So some of the discussions around how they wanted to be involved in terms of the strategy development and the implementation were around monitoring. So at the moment, they are doing a lot of monitoring. They're out working on country. There's a lot of land and sea ranger programs up here, and they're really keen to keep that going and actually provide, help provide job opportunities for future generations working on country. So they're very excited about the strategy and very engaged in terms of the implementation of the strategy, and really want to be involved in the whole delivery of the strategy as well. They're also keen to work with us on revegetation and coastal protection. So there's a number of projects through the Reef Assistance Program going forth at the moment with some of the other councils on coastal protection, looking at strengthening dunes, strengthening our waterways and things like that to protect against sea level rise and erosion. They also have a really good knowledge of native species. So they are keen to work in terms of the monitoring and looking at those changes over time. And things like they noticed that, you know, there's saltwater crabs up a freshwater creek that weren't there before and things like that. So they've actually noticed changes in terms of saltwater intrusion into freshwater areas. But yeah, definitely keen to continue to be involved in all aspects of implementation of this strategy. We also had a workshop on Saltwater Creek. So this is a catchment that's one of our high-risk catchments in terms of flooding and sea level rise. And we had a big workshop with all cross industries and council, and they were quite keen to be involved in that as well. They're very concerned about the catchment health. They wanted to see those ecosystem services used, maybe re-greening the drains and things like that, making the reconnecting fish passage. They were very aware of those issues and talked about, you know, that their grandfathers had walked in tribal ways in those areas and had used those areas, and they were really keen to talk about how that could be, you know, using that, bringing back that knowledge and using that traditional science to actually do a integrated catchment master plan. And we've put that into our strategy as well, in terms of they wanted to see integrated catchment plans of all the key catchments that actually looked at a whole of catchment approach. They're very interested in the aquifers and also things like revegetation and the pest species. There was some pest fish and things like that in there as well, but they were quite keen to work with council to look at future ways of actually working and using their knowledge to help with that, and litter cleanups as well. We've done some trial litter cleanups in Saltwater Creek before some of the wet season flows with the traditional owners, and we're trialling a few projects where we're actually they're coming in and actually taking out some of the litter in those creek systems, so that the litter doesn't flush out into the ocean when we get the wet season. We're also developing a climate change strategy, and we've had a number of engagement events around that. The traditional owners have been very involved in that. We held 2 youth climate summits, one in 2019 and one last week. And we had youth representatives at those climate summits, and they did the youth welcome to country and spoke really strongly about the future for their future generations. They also shared their stories with the mayor as part of a sharing circle, and also had a chance to present back their ideas to industry representatives and in a panel at our Performing Arts Centre. So part of the engagement, like during the engagement, we had some issues, I guess, around the value of that expertise and in terms of engagement and the sharing of that knowledge and providing that traditional science as part of the development of climate change or coastal adaptation strategies. And that raised some issues around payment for engagement. So they did have quite a large number of people turning up to the engagement. So they invited all the elders. We had up to 8 in some groups providing input into the assets, and we provided maps of some of those for them to use for their own purposes and gathering information. But they were quite keen to be paid. So we ended up negotiating a payment for the workshops for the coastal hazard adaptation strategy. But this brought up a whole heap of issues around, you know, some areas of council were paying them, some government departments were paying them. and they wanted to feel that their work was valued and that they were remunerated for that work. So we put up a memo to our executive team to actually look at how we could actually come up with some some principles around this and some payments for different types of engagement, whether it's engagement or providing traditional knowledge, and what's the difference, and then how we can do that. So at the moment, we are in the process of developing an engagement guideline, which outlines, when we engage traditional owners, what we engage them on, what the fee structures are, and then also to help develop that inclusive and culturally appropriate guidance for staff members, so that when people go out, they are working on that. But what I did find with the projects I've been working on is that relationship building has been probably the most critical part, and that going back to them over time and taking the time to come back to them over time and talk about the issues has been the most effective. And having one person, we have a first people's officer as well. So taking Ray with me to those workshops has been really great too, because they also then build those relationships over time. So it's not just about the guidelines, but it's about relationship building as well. So I guess the big learnings from this are one thing that really I found quite interesting was their real interest in being involved in solutions for the future, and them wanting to actually co-design the solutions. So they don't want to just be engaged. They actually, as the landowner, they want to be part of a co-design process. So they actually want to design these strategies and these processes together. So they're very engaged and involved in these areas. It's something that means a lot to them, particularly given that we have such a sensitive natural environment here. So that's sort of something that's made me really think about, how do we make meaningful engagement going forward, and how would that co-design work? And I think that's something that we are interested in looking at going forward. We've got a Coastal Councils Adaptation Task Force with 6 other councils, and one of the projects we identified was, how do we identify what tribal science is available, and how do we utilise that, and how do we work with traditional owners? So part of the funding that we had for the coastal adaptation strategies is being extended, and there'll be the opportunity to, as a group of councils, to actually apply for some of these projects as well. And LGAQ are also looking at doing more coastal adaptation strategies for some of the smaller Indigenous councils, because often the CEO might be managing the coastal adaptation strategy because they don't have a lot of staff. So they're going to go out to those councils, and the ones that haven't actually had a chance to undertake and don't have the resourcing to plan to undertake this, and help support those as well. The other thing was the role of tribal science versus traditional science. So how do these two things come together? So we did have consultants obviously looking at some of the coastal hazard mapping and the science, the traditional science, but then how do we bring in the tribal science and value that as well? So there is further work needed in this area, and I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts and your stories around this. And I think there's definitely an opportunity to develop more guidance materials and for them to share that information so that it can really be valued and used in this coastal climate and adaptation space going forward. So that's it from me. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, Steve, but.
Yes, it'd be nice to have a question or two. I've got one question, Sophie, because I'm just really coming up to speed with the idea of co-design from conception. I'm just wondering, would there be cases at Cairns where Cairns is participating in a project which was actually conceived by your First Nations people rather than the other way around?
Well, we haven't had any cases like that yet, but I think there's definitely a really strong interest, and I think there's definitely opportunities in that area. Our NRM groups are very interested. We've got an NRM body here that employs about 40 staff, and they are leading a lot of co-design type projects. So I think that there's definitely opportunities for them, but also in terms of accessing funding to implement projects. So that would say things like the catchment projects, like that they are also then able to access funding to deliver them. So if there's a co-design process, I think that would definitely help everyone in terms of implementation. But yes, we haven't gone that far yet, but I think our cultural guidelines is kind of our first step.
Right. Thank you for that. I think that was an excellent introduction to the topic, particularly the framework that you're developing, the policy framework. So it's a nice introduction. And just by way of a bit of an advertisement, I suppose, what ICLEI would like to see as our role is not only to connect people like we're meeting today, but if we can pick up on ideas for work that needs to be done, we could be very interested in helping to sort of coordinate that. You know, for instance, if it was developing common guidelines or
Yeah, great.
Okay, look, let's move on, but please everyone put your comments in the chat box and we'll be happy to give you a moment in the sun. So now we're going way down southwest from Cairns into South Australia to Adelaide. So there's actually the City of Adelaide, the Capital City Council. And it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Butcher, who's Senior Sustainability Advisor for Biodiversity, and also Marty Reeve, who's the Ghana Liaison Officer. And they're going to talk about the, if I get the pronunciation correct, the Ghana Kadla Paranthi Fire Management Project, planning and implementation. And I think we're all very keen to hear about fire management in the middle of a city. So over to you, Chris and Marty.
Thanks. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, we can.
Good, good, good. All right, I'm just going to go share my screen as well. Yep, 1 second. Lost you. There you are. Start. There we go. Okay. Now, yes. So ours is going to take a bit of a different direction. It's going to be more of a, in the form of a storytelling of something that we have done. So I'm going to have to reach forward because I don't have a mouse, but yeah. So just a quick acknowledgement. This is acknowledging that we are, the Ghana people are the traditional owners of this country where the City of Adelaide is situated today, and pays respects to elders past and present. Forgive me, I'm going to go through my notes.
Chris, can we ask you to give us the full screen view of the slides, please?
I'm showing the wrong one.
No, you only got the, it needs to be expanded.
Now, share. That one. Is that one better?
Not yet. That's it. Beautiful. Thank you.
Got it. Beautiful. That's what I wanted. Good. So yes, the project is called the Ghana Gadla Paranthi. Ghana, of course, the people of the Adelaide Plains, and Gadla Paranthi means to light a fire. And that was the name that the Ghana people chose as suitable for this project. Now, as this picture, this painting back from 1817 suggests, there's very early European records that use fire used by Aboriginal people for different language groups across Australia. I'm an ecologist, so I'm wary to stay in my lane, but it's safe to say that fire was not simply used as a hunting tool, as depicted in this painting, but it was also used to heal and maintain the land. And the use of fire is also a very useful component in caring for country. Thankfully, this practice remains. Its benefits are well recognised and requests for it actually increasing dramatically. South Australia has been a bit of a laggard with this, but we are catching up a bit. So this project was about the care of country using fire as a management tool within a capital city. It's about working with and empowering Ghana and other First Nations people. It's about restoring historic land management practices as business as usual for native vegetation in the Adelaide Parklands. It's about improving the quality of our soil and native biodiversity, strengthening partnerships with NGOs and universities, and creating a toolkit for more Aboriginal fire management within South Australia. It was a pretty complicated project, all things considered. It started as a biodiversity land management and the aims grew in complexity. Management aims, and it grew in complexity. We know that we're not the first council to put cultural fire back on the country, but we believe we're the first capital city to have attempted this. This project was an attempt to recognise and combine the cultural and biodiversity objectives and manage them respectively. And to find out what this looked like, it took some pretty good and serious conversations. Later on, we involved and enlisted help from further afield, and we got Indigenous fire practitioner Victor Stephenson involved. So the first sort of roundtable conversations, they really helped us to understand where we were coming from and where we wanted to go. Sometimes the conversation was quite serious. We wanted to cover a lot of ground. There was some sharing of knowledge. It was vitally important that we had these conversations early on in the project. I think it was, Sophie mentioned the previous thing, getting them involved right at the start, instead of Ghana coming around halfway through the project with a half-made project and just asking or expecting them to jump on board. For those who don't know where Ghana country is, this is it. This is their native title claim that was recognised. It occupies a fairly large chunk of the Fleurieu Peninsula where Adelaide is. This is a shot of the southeastern corner of our city. The city centre is in the top left corner of the photo. And the area where the burn happened is in that little patch of orange, just sort of near the centre. And you can see it's right at the fringe of our South Terrace there, which is right at the edge of the city, in our southern parklands. From an ecology perspective, it's a combination of closed woodlands, open woodland, and a bit of open grassland. And it's contains some remnant vegetation that persists, and it's been maintained by Bush for Life volunteers, which is part of Trees for Life, for about 10 or so years. A shot from the ground. This was pre-burn, winter 2020. It's got some good, you can see the tussocks there. It's also got lots of lilies and forbs and some beautiful vitidinias and other native plants that pop around. Unfortunately, almost all of the trees in the parklands have been cleared. So the trees that you do see are trees that have been replanted since colonisation. Continuing on some of the complications we sort of faced along the way. So the combination of potential benefits of First Nations people burning in a small site in the middle of a capital city, they're quite difficult to explain to people who are asking, let alone to quantify. And we didn't want to get caught up in the pressure of getting it wrong. So being paralysed to do nothing. So we planned well and implemented that plan and hoped for the best. And hopefully this video works because the results were amazing. We're just about to play a short video, which is hopefully embedded in the video. Let me know, please, if the sound doesn't work. Can you hear that?
Whenever we come together, we have fire. And for our people, it's an essential part of life. To actually sit there in the parklands and have a fire properly for 3 days was about bringing people together. That was an act of decolonisation, to recognise the histories of our people, to acknowledge our ancestors, to pay respects to our ancestors. It brings our people back. The day of the cultural burn, the feeling was just ripped.
Sorry, guys.
Really good. What we're trying to do today with this cultural burn, we're bringing forth life. When we talk about biodiversity and looking after our country and walking on our country, it's a spiritual moment for us.
When you put the right fire on country at the right time, the clean smoke helps germinate the seed bank in the ground. You know, you're caring for country, bringing that part of the country back to life and reigniting the spirit in that country, you know.
We had Victor Stephenson on the day, which I was really happy about. In a park in the middle of the city, doing cultural fire and doing a burn. And I've been all over the place, you know, and like seeing the city from outside while we're burning, but never inside surrounded. So this is a new experience for me and one I won't forget, especially with the Ghana people. It's never been done in a capital city ever before. So, you know what, we are history makers. We are making history. We just leave it now. and let us just go along and do its thing. But if we were to go and put fire everywhere, that thing will just take off. Look at the ash, the black ash, light.
Our people haven't done this for years, and to be the fellas here on country doing it. All these young fellas here, they get involved. Special, very special.
A long time coming, too long. Seen all the burns that have happened environmentally, and it's just, we've been destroying this country. And look what we could have been doing this whole time. Yeah, it's time to move forward in the right direction, I think.
Today was that very first seed for, Adelaide and those surrounding areas around here in South Australia. And, I'm just, I just know that this will continue for them. And, and it's not going to be easy.
I'm very excited to be able to come back and monitor it and see what comes back from this burn. And being one of the people that put fire on the country, I don't really have words for it. It's very special to be part of.
That young generation, we're all a part of this together as one. We all take ownership. As I sit here in the tree reflecting, I'll enjoy those tears of happiness, a smile. Thank you. Thanks to all.
All right. Yeah, moving on. So these next slides will just run through the photos of the event, and you think the photos capture a glimpse of the emotions felt during that day. And while they're screening, I'll just go through some of the things we needed to do in building the project. So in doing so, since the inception of the project, we had in the room Kaurna elders and members of their community. We had representatives from the Department of Environment and Water, DEW, and from their fire management. We also had high-level City of Adelaide staff, and that was an important step to give the project the respect that it was due, to show that we had management level at least, and sometimes associate director level attending these meetings. Very soon after that, we involved ecologists who specialize in fire ecology or native grasslands or woodlands for advice. We had Victor Stephenson, who featured in that video there. We had not-for-profit community organizations, Bush for Life, for maintenance and monitoring advice. Local universities also got involved with their monitoring. And nearby residents were this part of the stakeholder group, sporting clubs, etc. We had a hospital just across the road from the site as well. Getting those people involved, on board and supportive of this project is how we got there. Of course, there were challenges. What started off as a biodiversity project evolved to include Kaurna, and this led to additional objectives and project co-management. So going from a City of Adelaide project to being managed by more than one organisation. And that brought in differing opinions between Adelaide, from the Western approach and the Aboriginal approach. Now, planning an event, which was originally supposed to happen in April 2020 and had strong political interest and strong cultural interest, had different requirements and considerations as far as who to invite, who was speaking, who was running what. And funnily enough, this event would have been cancelled because they had a heavy rain on that day. But if that wasn't for a global pandemic, they cancelled the event for 2020, 3 weeks before that date. But the project is ended, but the work really still does continue. Monitoring of the site happened before the burn, and it's continuing after the burn. The photos there show. On the left there, we have Drew, who featured in the video, coming back to monitor the site with our biodiversity team on the ground. And on the right, we've got staff from the University of Adelaide with their drone, which are doing monitoring from the air, so we can correlate that information and see what we can find. Because we want to know what returning fire to the site will mean to the plants there. As far as managing expectations go, the Ghana people, fire ecologists, bushlife volunteers, and other experts, they all visited their site and assessed its suitability for the fire management. Members of the Ghana community, they received training from Victor Stephenson, which was hugely important and welcome step in the process. The fire was, of course, a Ghana project, so they needed to be the ones to put fire on country, and that was a really special thing to see. We had people from firefighters on site from the MFS and state agencies, but as you could see from the video, it was a completely safe, friendly environment, and they just were simply not needed, but it was a good learning experience for them too. To show some photos, this is obviously a photo of these 4 photos show the progression of the site over time. From fire, the new shoots start to pop up just days after the event. You can still see the ash on the ground there. And this led to more bare soil, which is great for lots of native insects, including native bees and ants and all sorts. And it gives a chance for new plants to come through. And now we're looking at a very healthy, fresh, rejuvenated landscape there. So the things that helped us along the way is having Aboriginal land management incorporated into our policies. Our integrated biodiversity management plan has one of its main objectives of the three objectives is to incorporate Ghana knowledge into the management of our biodiversity. And this was echoed in the Reconciliation Action Plan, from which the IBMP got the objectives from. And both of these policy documents have been supported by council, so this has made approval process really a much easier process. So what's next? So we are currently in discussions with Ghana for the next year's burn. We are looking at locations, and some have been selected, options have been selected. We haven't finalized them. We got 2 other videos in production, and these are to train. This is one of them is a Ghana resource to train another First Nations people, Ghana and other First Nations people, and the other is a short documentary of the process, like a 10-minute version of that video that we saw. Monitoring will continue. Ghana, University of Adelaide, and us were all involved in that, and the conversation is most importantly spreading across Ghana country, and other councils and state agencies are setting up burns of their own, of course, with Ghana help. Now, I'll leave it on these last 2 quotes that have come from Ellen Sumner, who was one of the first men you saw, and Victor Stephenson, to just to highlight the importance, not only for the biodiversity, but the cultural connection and how important this has been received. And I think with that, we can open it to discussion if we have time. If not, I can close this down when needed.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And one of your last points answered my question that I was going to ask, which was because the Ghana people have such a strong ownership of that, is it likely this will occur in other councils around Greater Adelaide? And you're saying that's the plan. So it's a way of really spreading this practice.
Yes, it is absolutely the plan, and it always was from the start of this. It was not supposed to be a pilot project or like a standalone thing. It was supposed to be a first step, not the only step we're going to take.
Yeah, so it's acted as a catalyst really, and from this burn, Ghana are actually driving the development of a 3-year training course. They're working with Victor Stephenson from Cairns, so who has prepared like a national cultural birding course. So Ghana are keen to develop one of those in Adelaide. So it's been, as somebody said in the video, it's a small project, but the results and the burning going forward is probably the best that's the main outcome.
Right, and it's interesting the connection with Cairns, which I think was coincidental. But if Victor has come from Cairns, it's there we are. We're linking across the country. I was going to say too, the webinar is due to finish formally on the hour, so in another 15 or so minutes. But we're very happy to leave it open so that people can keep on chatting afterwards, because it's probably better now to go straight to the Yarra Ranges, which is another example of fire management. And then I think that'll prompt some very interesting conversations. So we're moving now to Darren Wandon, who we can see there, who's Cultural Fire Sticks Officer, and Gary Detters, who's the Indigenous Development Coordinator for the Shire of Yarra Ranges, which is on the eastern fringe of Greater Melbourne. So over to you, Yarra Ranges.
Okay, thanks, Steve. And yeah, Chris, thank you, and thank you too, Sophie. We're actually going to continue that connection, and that'll become evident as we get rolling along with our presentation. The connections sort of like beyond synchronistic, and I'm sensing some sort of cultural ORE at play here. I'd too like to acknowledge country. I'm coming from the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people, and acknowledge their elders past and present, and also want to acknowledge all other Aboriginal people who've played a significant role in the history of our region. A little bit about Yarra Ranges. Unlike the last presentation, Yarra Ranges is what we call an interface council. It is a small area of urban sprawl and larger areas of country. I think we've got about something like 47 various townships. We copped a fair hiding in the Black Saturday 2009 bushfires. A lot of deaths, a lot of country, a lot of wildlife and just wiped out. As a response to that, and as the years rolled on, Yarra Ranges is very keen to look at better ways about being able to build resilience in country itself. Very, very explosive, home of the legendary Mount Nash, the tallest flowering trees in the world. Our forests here are thick, and it's very susceptible to bushfire. Areas like the Dandenongs where I live and Warburton up in the Upper Yarra are considered in the top 3 fire risk areas of the world. So it's pretty serious stuff. So as a result of those Black Saturday fires and doing further investigations, we too became aware of Victor Stevenson up in Cairns. And that led to a whole range of activities, a couple of trips up to Cairns, the Wudjil community. I saw that on the map there before. And Darren joined us up in Nelsonby the following year. So the whole idea of what we're calling the Return of the Fire Sticks project is to set up an ongoing cultural burning program here in the Yarra Ranges. It's to do with trying to bring back those Indigenous knowledge systems and those social systems around structuring the way that we operate in our area, to trying to get that better integration and how would you put it, connection to nature. And it's through this program does a lot of things. It certainly provides Aboriginal people with that opportunity for cultural practice and passing that on to non-Aboriginal people, which we're regarding as one of the great gifts from Aboriginal people to mainstream Australia. I'm going to hold over to Darren Wandon now. Darren's part of our, I suppose, relationship with our traditional owners. Our traditional owner engagement and relationship sort of works on a few different levels. We've certainly supported the local Wurundjeri people in strategic approaches to state government to oversee the handback of some lands. We've got a partnership agreement with our local traditional owner group who oversee the Corranderk Mission Station, which we regard as the spiritual home of Aboriginality in Victoria for very, very good reasons. We're involved with the traditional owners on a number of projects, some quite significant, such as the multi-million-dollar Ridgewalk project that explores the connection between art, landscape and people. Part of that looks like what was that like prior to colonisation. And we use a lot of language around our parks, play spaces and reserves. But clearly for us, our main project is the Return of the Fire Sticks project. And Council, I suppose, is very committed to that. And as a result, we actually have engaged a Cultural Fire Sticks officer. And I'll hand over to you, Darren.
Excellent. Thanks, Gary. Hi, my name's Darren Wandon, Wurundjeri man, and also the Fire Sticks coordinator for Yarra Ranges Council. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming from Wurundjeri country today and acknowledge my elders past and present, and also emerging, and any other Indigenous people here with us today. So I want to talk to you a bit about the Fire Sticks, Return to the Fire Sticks project that Yarra Ranges is undertaking at the moment. The Fire Sticks program is a partnership between Wurundjeri Woiwurrung Cultural Heritage Aboriginal Corporation the Fire Sticks Alliance, and Yarra Ranges Council. Its purpose is to support Indigenous self-determination and embed Indigenous knowledge systems and practices into Yarra Ranges Shire and its people. Environmentally, the purpose of Fire Sticks is to bring balance, heal, restore, and maintain systems throughout the landscapes. Reading country and treating systems individually rather than a one-size-fits-all approach to managing land. If we look at a fire stick practitioner as a doctor, the landscape, the patient, and the fire, the medicine, we start to understand what it means to heal country with fire. Wurundjeri country has some of the most unique flora and fauna anywhere in the world. Wurundjeri people have been working with these systems for thousands of generations and only seek to restore balance once again. Restoring these knowledge systems and practices brings back healthy country and in turn, healthy people. Healthy country is much more resilient to the effects of bushfire and can help to mitigate the increase in intensity we are seeing in bushfires moving forward into the climate change. I'd like to share with you now a short clip where Victor Stephenson, who you've seen quite a bit already, and myself are assessing a site that has been seeing cultural fire for 4 years, located in Dixon's Creek. On this journey, we will pretty much cover the assessment to see what changes have happened over the 4 years that this particular site has been receiving cultural fire. Thank you very much.
Now it's time to burn all that leaf litter country while everything is green and all the moisture's in the soil. And that's how you heal this sort of country, with leaf litter.
Underneath, we've got shrubs that are coming back through. We've got small lomandras coming back through. We've got these little mosses and stuff through here as well that are holding the moisture in the soil again and not just running off and getting erosion problems. It's coming back to what it should be.
That's exactly right. And this is the same ecosystem just down, not far down the track where we just lit that leaf litter up.
Yep.
This is what this looked like. And this would look the same after 11 years as it is down there if we didn't apply that fire.
Yeah.
So the fire activates it and brings back all the tucker.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that's...
And not just for us too, for the animals, you know. It's their food too. It's their food source.
That's right.
We live off them too, so it's important for everything.
You can see all the chewing marks in the grass.
Yep.
They're having a feed.
Yep.
Really good.
Yeah, little seeds that are dropping into and actually being able to be held on to, so the seeds can actually get back into the soil, not just getting washed away, you know, down with the rain. They've got something to hold on to now.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So yeah, you know, it's a stark difference, and if you don't activate it, then it will always be leaf litter and contributing to the extinction of our wildlife and country.
Absolutely.
And culture.
Yep, that's right.
That's why the training's important, because knowledge is the most important thing and the safest thing you can have.
Yeah.
Not the equipment, not the hat, not the fire code and
the radio and the maps and the plans. And
I mean, that's all part of the modern day land management and knowing what you're burning for, why you're burning.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just amazing to see that all that grass is coming back and food coming back, you know?
Absolutely.
And, you know, and
love to see it when it's at its complete full health that it's supposed to be, and then coming back to do those sort of, you know, almost like maintenance, but as that upkeep, you know, the burns that it needs to keep it healthy.
Yeah.
Really look forward to that. Yeah.
This is an exciting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, because it's part of building your culture back, your knowledge of your landscapes.
Yeah.
You're reviving that knowledge from the country.
Yeah.
And the country is showing you that it's the right way.
My kids get to grow up with this, you know, knowing this as normal practice. It's not a new thing for them to learn. They get to grow up being a part of it and being around it. I think that's the most special thing for me, is that they get to see it with their own eyes and practice it and experience it and, you know, understand it as they're growing up. I think it's a really special thing. Yeah.
And it goes to show too that we can heal the landscape, but you know, we need to give the opportunity to be able to do that and demonstrate that and build the jobs, build the employment, and get the country healthy so that there's all more opportunities that come from that for women, for men, for children, for everyone. And we can only do that if Aboriginal people get the chance to lead.
Yeah.
Because that knowledge has been around for thousands of years, and it's been done over and over and over, and that's why we know what's going to happen when we burn right away, and we see this, and we know what's going to happen if we don't burn right from that last place.
Right. Yeah.
And so the knowledge is already there.
Yeah.
So
and the proof, the knowledge is there, but the proof is there too.
That's right.
Yeah,
and when you see the proof,
yeah,
that's the language coming from the land.
That's right.
And that's what I'm saying, when the land is showing you and teaching you. And so, getting that baseline structure first, that knowledge, and just starting from there is, it will get you on your way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And grow old and knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And then look there's a grass tree down there.
Yeah, let's go have a look. Yeah, awesome.
Ah, look there, see?
Yeah, there he is.
That's incredible because this is the only one here.
Yeah.
Old grass tree.
They should be here. They should be prominent throughout here. So it's good to see them on the way back.
Yeah, it's really good. And you know what? He related to fire too, in a big way, because he make fire with his stems.
Yep.
It's food for people, and he also carries fire too in the trunk.
Yeah.
You can carry it all day, long way.
Yeah.
The trunk of the tree. It's all relation to fire.
Yep.
Very special tree, and you find him all over the country. Like a lot of plants, they're all related. And so gum tree down here, we got gum tree up north, and stringy bark and bloodwood and all those trees, mahoganies to tea trees, everything. All of them, they all relation. Just like you got different Aboriginal people in different parts of Australia, they all have their own unique language, have their own unique place where they live. And they all have a certain different shape and size too.
That's right, yeah.
But they're all Aboriginal people.
That's right.
It's the same with the plants.
Yep.
They have structured the same way.
Yep.
Because the people been on the land for so long that they take the structure of the country.
Yep.
So gum tree clan, bloodwood tree clan,
yep,
stringy bark clan, sometimes mixed blood clan.
Yeah, Wurundjeri, Manigum clan. So
that's it. See? You start to see, no? It's the same structure.
That's right. Yeah.
That people become part of the landscape.
Yep.
And that's where we need to get back to again as humanity and across the whole world, because if we're not going back to living close to nature and structuring our society around the law of nature, and which is where cultural law comes from.
That's right.
Then we're never going to be able to live with the country in a positive way, and they'll continue to fight Mother Nature and fight the fires, and which is something that we just shouldn't be doing. And you can see now the change in the society. People are starting to listen, and people are starting to work together.
Yep.
People are appreciating Aboriginal culture and knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think we're on the right road as a nation if we just keep on doing what we're doing.
Absolutely.
But the thing is that it's inevitable.
Yes.
This has to be the turning point.
Yep.
Otherwise, the younger generation is going to have a harder job to do.
That's right. Yep.
So, congratulations on getting your first start.
Yeah.
And building your fire knowledge and for your people back on country here. And I hope I come back next time and you've got 10 young fellas, women and men that are willing to learn,
guide them through,
and on their way to healing landscapes.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, let's rock and roll.
All right.
Welcome back, everyone. That was a part of the video that we shot for our National Reconciliation Week event earlier this year on country out at Dixon's Creek. The country that we were burning on that particular day with Victor and Darren was heavily scorched back in Black Saturday in 2009. There were actually some deaths in that area. The whole country was just absolutely devastated, and the whole area is just leaf litter and trees on the ground. And Fire Stick's actually rejuvenating the whole area. Darren, would you like to bring us home, please, brother?
There's one thing I can say when it comes to that side of Dixon's Creek, to look at it when we first got introduced to the idea of burning there, it was just a landscape that had literally looked like it had nothing to offer. As you mentioned, Gary, leaf litter, dead scarred trees, not a lot of greenery at all. But that reintroduction of the fire, in a very short space, we're looking at 3 years at this point. We've seen a complete turnaround in mosses on the ground, grasses returning, wildlife returning. I ran into a few tiger snakes while I was around there, you know, just to show how much we've got the fauna coming back like it should. The ability to be able to make those changes in such a small amount of time just shows that we're on the right path. But if I could finish up with anything, I'd have to say that a message from Fire Sticks, which is the right fire, right country, right time, and also that you know, if we have healthy country, we have a resilient country, and I think that's what we should all be aiming for.
Thanks, Darren. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you to Victor as well. It's great to see him cropping up like that. And Darren, I think once you've got tiger snakes, you know you've won it. There are some interesting chat issues coming through. We also have a direct question from Elise Jeffrey, who's Elise, are you able to unmute and ask your question yourself? I'm not quite sure. Jess, is that possible?
I think so. Can I do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure. Hi. I'm Elise Jeffrey. I'm at the City of Hobart and I'm part of a fire and biodiversity program here. So my question was to both the City of Adelaide and the Yarra Ranges City Council was, did you have any fire as part of your land management biodiversity programs before you introduced cultural burning?
Chris.
We didn't use fire. It's been in the plans as something to investigate for quite some time, and but yeah, the cultural element came in. It's sort of the thing that doesn't need to be said but it does need to be said, but it's the way that the land evolved with fire, so the cultural element was there, but to answer your question, it's been in the policies for quite some time, but it's never been implemented.
And at Yarra Ranges, we're about to redo our biodiversity strategy. And on the back of the program that Darren's leading here, the strategy will be underpinned with a strong fire stick or Indigenous knowledge base. The key to trying to do that is to actually get people to reframe their connection to the natural world around them and understand that people are part of the landscape, they're not separate from it. And that looks like changing the way that we're doing land management at Yarra Ranges through the program.
Great, thank you both. I noticed Catherine McNaughton from Bayside has put a very interesting piece of information about an upcoming filming. Again, Catherine, would you like to demute and unmute? Demute, I suppose, and just tell us about that filming, the screening.
I'm not from Bayside. I just saw that film was on. I've
right. Okay.
Watched it recently. That was hosted by the City of Glen Ira, and it was fantastic. When I saw it again with a new Q&A panel that looked really interesting, and the discussion of traditional owner burning and particularly considering climate change and bushfire risk, I thought I'd share that with the audience.
Thank you. Everyone can see it in the chat with the link. We've got another question, and I was also going to say, if any of you listening would like to follow up with one of the speakers, we'll put our slide up in a moment with email and website contact details, and we can always introduce you to one of the speakers. Let's go to Amanda Stone. You had a question, Amanda. Would you like to speak to it?
Well, I think Gary's just answered it in part. Thank you, Gary. But I can imagine lighting a fire in the middle of a city in Adelaide, or where there's already been fire damage, devastating fire, that there might be some parts of the community who are concerned about that. And I wondered how each of you communicates the benefits of this approach so that you've got people on board.
We had a strong community engagement plan. Chris and I door knocked all the businesses around the area, and we letterbox dropped all the local residents. And one of the things that Ghana are really keen on is engaging directly with the community. So as part of the cultural burn, we had a cultural camp and went for 3 nights, and the local residents were invited by Ghana to come along. There was a campfire, and residents were invited and took up that invitation come and visit and sit around the fire with Ghana elders and chat about just have general chats, I suppose. So that really sort of demystified the there's probably a lot of those people who hadn't actually met a Ghana person. So it was a strong reconciliation opportunity, which really worked. So we only really found we got strong support for the project.
Yeah, we did have a couple of drop-in sessions. This was back in 2020 when we were planning to have it, and we had a Your Say page, which remained open for the whole time, where people were welcome to write in and with their questions, concerns, and things like that. There are very easy responses to the questions about, the potential of it getting out of control, and that's like, well, if we expand this practice, then it won't happen. It's these things get out of control because of the build-up of litter and things like that, and it's a preventative action as well as healing.
Fantastic, thank you. The joining people around the fire sounds like a really good approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Amanda. Yeah, we all love sitting around a fire, that's for sure. Before we finish, I'm going to ask Jessica to put up a slide about our next webinar, and then we can come back to further discussion. So, Jess, are you able to put that one up? Okay, so sticking to our commitment to monthly webinars, the next webinar will be on the 21st of October. It's actually an evening event. We're doing that in partnership with the University of Melbourne, and it's actually the launch of, I'll just read this, the launch of the new report by Metropolis on metropolitan approaches to biodiversity conservation. And there'll be a panel discussion by the report authors, but also by a number of cities who are featured as case studies in the report, offering their perspectives on enhancing urban nature. So very much building on what we're doing today. So keep an eye on our website. And Jess, if you could go to the last slide with our contact details. Here we go. So please, anyone on the call today, feel free to email me if you'd like to follow up on anything. Sophie has put up quite a few links in the chat box in response to an earlier question. And if you go to that, to our website and to the Cities with Nature page, you'll be able to keep in touch with our webinar programs. We'll also put up a link to the recording of today. So look, let's go back. Who else would like to ask a question or make a comment from anyone of the 30 plus people who are still on the call? Unmute yourself and go for it. Okay, it looks like we're just about done. And any of the speakers, any last words you'd like to contribute?
I'd just like to extend on the question that Councillor Amanda Stone had. I think when it comes to communicating to people, I suppose, about their concerns, one of the main concerns we find is that there's obviously quite a large fear when it comes to fire. So just as Chris has mentioned before, the main thing we try and do is try and put fire in spots where it is in that public eye, where people can see the benefits of it and they can walk past and see that it's not intense. They can walk through afterwards and assess it for themselves, and also really bringing them along on that journey. And we find that once people become a part of it, that they're more than willing to support it after that.
Thanks, Darren. All right, well, look, I think that's a good point to finish. I would like to really sincerely thank Chris and Marty and Darren and Gary and Sophie and Amanda for your contributions, and let's treat this as the start of a conversation. Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.